Hi, I'm Kimberly. Welcome back to the Success Series Talks on Money. Talks designed to help you get what you want out of life. Remember to listen, take notes, and most importantly, act. In the New Testament of the Bible, there's an interesting story. There are three men who work for the same person. At one point, he gives one man 5 talents, which for all intents and purposes is actually money, okay? Their initial real version of the story. Another 2 and another 1. Now, I would assume that the differing amounts of pay had to do with their value as a worker or the time they had put into the job. So the employer leaves, and while he's gone, the man with 5 talents increases his to 10. And the man with 2 increases his to 4, and the man with 1, well, he went and buried his in the ground. Now, why he did that is beyond me. He knew his employer would come back and expect an increase, but that was his choice. The employer did come back, and he praised the first 2 men equally for increasing what they had been given, but he was angry with the third man for wasting his money. So he actually took back the 1 talent. Now, there are a lot of interpretations and meanings and layers to this parable, but like mentioned before, there is a literal meaning, and that's the one I want to talk a little bit about. Now, it was a fairly common custom at the time for people to bury their money in the ground because there weren't banks. So sometimes this would lead to them forgetting where it was or dying without disclosing it. So it's kind of risky in and of itself. It would have taken a labor about 6,000 days or over 20 years to earn the equivalent of 1 talent. In today's money, this would equal somewhere between $100,000 and $1 million, with the $100,000 being the low pay of only making $3.85 an hour. The employer was a very wealthy man. When he entrusted his servants with his money, he expected them to do with it what he would have done. Now, obviously, since he had so much money, he had learned to invest wisely, and had he been there, he would have continued to invest his money and increase it. With this in mind, is it any wonder that he was so mad at the man who simply stuck it in the ground? He did nothing with it. He had absolutely nothing to show. He didn't even buy anything. This reminds me of the story of one of Aesop's fables. He tells the story of an old miser who one day went and sold all of his possessions and bought a huge lump of gold. And then he went and buried it in the ground. He didn't do anything with the gold. Instead, each day he just went and looked at it as it sat in the ground. Well, one of his workers over time picked up that he was always leaving and going to the same spot, and so one day he decided to follow him. And when he found out the secret, he waited till his master was gone, and then he actually stole his master's money. The man was upset and was complaining when a neighbor told him to go get a stone and put it in its place and pretend it was the gold, because it would be of as much worth and value as the gold had been, seeing as he never used the gold anyway. So I've been thinking about this, and as I've thought about it, I've decided there are really 3 types of people in this world. I mean, there's variations of all 3 of these, but more or less this is where you come down to. So the first type is the people who just save for everything they're worth. They are miserly, they don't buy anything, they live in as small of a place as they can, they donate little to anyone and just constantly save. A few of these may decide to even invest, which gives them a much higher increase on money faster. However, they just sit on it. They don't really use it for anything. They don't start foundations or go on super cool vacations all the time or have nice cars or anything. So I have a relative who was like this. He hit 18 years old at the start of the Great Depression, and that left an indelible mark in his mind. He never really got into investing, but he saved every penny and very seldom ever treated anyone to lunch or paid to go to anything. I mean, occasionally, and he did go on a couple vacations, but he just didn't do a lot of stuff. He was super suspicious of banks, so when he died, they found hundreds of thousands of dollars in his house. It was stuffed in walls, in the basement, and under the mattresses. Now, do you know how hard it would be to get that kind of money? That means that it was just the raw money, because he had no interest building up on any of that. This was just what he had actually saved in and of itself. Okay, I still wouldn't be surprised to this day if they didn't miss some of that, and someday the owners of that house in the future are going to find a significant amount of money when they're maybe changing something or remodeling. He was so determined to be secure that he didn't even enjoy his money at all. So the other reason I think people are this type is because of a misunderstanding of the Bible and of God. Some people believe it is bad to have any possessions. If you have more than you absolutely need, then you are evil. This comes from a quote that says, "The love of money is the root of all evil," which some people quote as, "Money is the root of all evil." See the difference there? One of those has to do with, where your heart is, okay? So the funny thing is, clearly money can't be evil, since when Christ gave the parable of the talents, the employer technically represented him. If money were evil, then why would he have had himself having millions of dollars? So people use this as a reason to save and invest, and that is fine. And they can give money away to the poor, but they don't think it's okay to own anything because that would be materialistic. They live their whole lives just acquiring money without benefiting themselves or others really. So I want you to think about this for a minute, but when something has no value or worth, then we say it is vain, right? The interesting thing is God looks down on things being done without a purpose. He doesn't like his name being taken in vain. He curses those who are lazy and do nothing worthwhile, part of the problem with the third man in the parable. And he gets frustrated with those whose motives and intentions have no purpose for good. Think about the Pharisees. The third man didn't just make the mistake of not increasing his wealth. He also didn't even use it to help the poor or increase the economy in any way. You see, some people have the mistaken belief that the only righteous use of money is if you give it away to the poor and you don't benefit at all besides the satisfaction of helping someone and the blessings God has given you. However, there is another part to this. You see, not only is it righteous to give to the poor, which it is, but it is also righteous to spend your money wisely for services rendered. In the parable, the employer clearly owned a business that allowed him to hire others and provide jobs for them. How did he get his money to pay his employees? Well, he got it because other people spent money for whatever services he was offering at the time. As a result, he got paid, which allowed him to pay those who worked for him, which allowed all of them to provide for their families, and maybe even some of them gave to charity as well. Without someone spending money, no one would have any way to provide for themselves and others. Is it not just as righteous to pay someone for using their talents and abilities to bless people's lives and to provide for their families and to get something in return, as it is to just give money to someone without receiving anything in return? If it weren't, then there wouldn't actually be any money to help the poor, to build churches, or to hire people to work. We would become an idle society, which is highly looked down upon by God, because if it weren't okay to make money and spend it, then the restaurants couldn't open, the store wouldn't exist, gyms would become obsolete, and no one would own cars or live in houses because it'd be unrighteous to spend any of our money. Everything in this world would stop if it were true that it is unrighteous to spend the money we earn. God doesn't have a problem with being rich. Moses was rich. Abraham was rich. David was rich. Solomon was rich. Some of his apostles were rich. He cared about two things: where their hearts were, and that they didn't just waste it frivolously. As long as these two conditions were met, then God was perfectly fine with any amount of money the person had. He didn't condemn the man with 5 talents for being so selfish and getting 5 more, or for not giving some of that to the third man, even though that would have been an increase of several $million when he increased that by 5 talents. Instead, not only did he praise him, but he actually gave him the extra talent from the third man. That's interesting, by the way, to me. The second type of person is the type who doesn't save or invest at all, but only spends money. Chances are that with that spending his own money, he's also spending other people's money or buying on credit. The problem with this type of person isn't that they spend money or that they have nice things. The problem is that they are still not wise stewards. By living beyond their means, they lose the ability to influence and help others. It places them in a position of hardship, and it limits what God can do with them and their talents. Now, there is nothing wrong with supporting businesses and making purchases as long as you do it within the bounds the Lord has set, which means after your purchases, you would still have plenty of money to take care of your own family. The only ones who are ever condemned for their money are those who use it for things they shouldn't, things that are immoral, unethical, or illegal. Everyone else is honestly fine. The final group, or third group, are the ones who save/invest and spend their money. They usually have a healthy balance between what comes in, what they spend, and what they invest. They have a nest egg that they don't dig into. So this is like the goose who lays the golden egg. As long as the goose was alive, then the man had gold every day. However, when he became greedy, he killed the goose and lost his security. No more golden eggs, right? So some people do this in real life. They pull out all their savings or investments because they really want something more right now. However, the people in this third group put money into certain things and they don't touch the original capital because they know this would start to diminish their supply. It would kill their goose. Okay? Instead, they allow it to continue to grow and grow. Then they use the interest from these investments to either invest more or to fund some of their pleasures. But meanwhile, the golden egg, is still increasing and is still coming on a regular basis. So the interesting thing, though, is despite the fact that this group is very wise, they often get put down by others who don't understand because they often go on expensive vacations, have more than one house, and go to fancy parties. However, what people miss is how much good these people are doing. They often start charities and donate to each other's charities. It is not uncommon for them to host a charity dinner and charge tens of thousands of dollars per plate because they know their rich friends will come and pay that much for charity. This is a group that some larger churches fall into. They've been wise and they invest and spend wisely, and others like to put them down for their elaborate buildings. What they miss is that there's nothing wrong with having beautiful, ornate things. God likes us to take care of our living spaces and to keep them as nice as possible. These churches aren't actually doing anything wrong. They're attractive, which attracts more people to them. Having influence is actually an important thing and can actually further God's work. That's why it was okay for Abraham to have money. Or how about Joseph, who was sold into Egypt, to have money? His influence allowed him to help so many more people than otherwise would have been possible. So sometimes having this money and having these things actually creates influence, which then allows people to help further God's purposes even more. Okay? So the churches aren't doing anything wrong. They are following the prescribed course that God set up in both the Old Testament and the New Testament. And if people really knew the Bible, they would never accuse this group of using their money unrighteously. Money is a good thing. It allows us to use our talents, pay others for their talents, have time to serve, take care of ourselves and our families, and to help those who are less fortunate. What could possibly be bad about any of that? So, go out there, make the world a better place by sharing what you have, and create even more of that. Thanks for listening, and make it a great day. Remember to subscribe to my channel so you can listen to other great talks. Also, give it a like and share it with others that you think may benefit.